Think about a sudden, violent blast of air that erupts from your body without a second of permission. Now, scientists call this sternutation. Most of us just dismiss it as a simple reflex, but it's actually a high-speed biological cleaning system. And it's not just a human thing. Cats, dogs, and even chickens experience this same explosive drive. When dust, dander, germs, or pollen breach the nasal defenses, the body triggers an emergency response to eject the irritants. This is the sternutatory reflex, a complex electrical signal that surges through the ophthalmic division of the trigeminal nerve, specifically via the anterior ethmoidal branch. It might feel like a momentary glitch, but it is a precise, high-pressure explosion designed to keep your respiratory tract clear. If we could shrink down and look inside your nose, we would find a complex environment lined with tiny, fine hairs and a layer of sticky mucus. These two elements act as a biological filter, working together to trap microscopic particles from the air. Whether it's a speck of dust, flower pollen, or the sharp chemical sting of pepper, these particles get snagged in the mucus. It's easy to think of it as just a tickle, but it's actually the first domino in a massive biological chain reaction. Of course, the trigger isn't always an external intruder. Sometimes the system simply becomes overloaded. When you have a cold, the excessive accumulation of mucus can trigger a sneeze, simply because the nasal passage is too full to function. The irritation acts as the signal, and your body immediately begins preparing for a high-pressure cleaning cycle. The process begins with a deep, involuntary breath held in the lungs for a heartbeat, creating a pressurized reservoir of air. At that moment, your chest muscles clench tight, and an immense amount of internal pressure builds up. The biological machinery takes full control. To ensure the blast is effective, your tongue is forced against the roof of the mouth, sealing off the oral cavity. Because the mouth is closed, the coming explosion is forced exclusively through the nostrils. That precise, reflexive contact between the tongue and the palate ensures the air has only one primary exit. Wait for it. Then comes the final singular burst. A sneeze is a high-speed exhalation that clears the nasal passage with violent efficiency. The entire sequence is a choreographed clench and release, a biological blast that happens in a fraction of a second. For decades, we assumed a sneeze was merely a way to kick out a foreign object. But a 2012 paper in the journal FOSSEB shifted that perspective. There is a microscopic maintenance crew at work called Cilia. These are tiny, hair-like paddles lining the noses and sinuses, and they are the secret to the entire operation. To see this in action, researchers from the University of Pennsylvania did something remarkable. They grew a miniature synthetic nose in an incubator for several weeks, using cells from healthy adult nostrils. The resulting tissue was a perfect anatomical match for a human sinus, complete with its own active cilia. The scientists then puffed air onto the lining to simulate a sneeze. They observed that this burst of air triggered the cilia to move back and forth repeatedly for several minutes after the fake sneeze. It works exactly like a broom, resetting the entire nasal environment. Biologists now believe the nose requires a periodic reboot, and the sneeze is the restart button. Now, we move into something truly odd. For a portion of the population, a sneeze isn't triggered by dust or pollen, but by light. This is known as the photic sneeze reflex, or more formally, HU syndrome. The name is a scientific joke, a contrived acronym for autosomal dominant compelling helio-ophthalmic outburst. This isn't a random quirk, it's an inherited, congenital, autosomal dominant condition. If one parent has this trait, there's a 50% chance the child will inherit the syndrome. But what triggers the explosion? It isn't the color of the light or a specific wavelength. Instead, it's a sudden, significant change in light intensity. When someone with this trait steps into bright sunlight, they may find themselves caught in a series of repeated, uncontrolled sneezing fits. Dr. Tan Ji Bin from the National Neuroscience Institute notes these bursts typically range from 1 to 10 consecutive sneezes. It's a fascinating genetic trait, but this glitch in the circuitry creates a hidden danger, especially when you try to fight the reflex, something we'll explore shortly. This information is not medical advice or a diagnosis. See a healthcare professional or seek care. It's almost like our brain's electrical wiring is just slightly off-center for some of us. When we examine the data, the patterns are surprisingly specific. A 1995 study published in the Journal of the American Optometric Association by the University of Alabama at Birmingham found that 67% of these light-triggered sneezers were female and 94% were Caucasian. Interestingly, the trigger isn't limited to light. A periocular injection, where a needle is inserted into the area surrounding the eyeball, can also trigger a sneeze in people with this reflex. This is a known risk during corneal transplant surgeries or when administering local anesthetics for a retrobulbar block. There's also a significant correlation between this reflex and having a deviated nasal septum. While the sneezing bursts happen in an instant, the refractory period, the time the system takes to recover, can last up to 24 hours. Despite all this evidence, the specific gene responsible for Achu syndrome remains unidentified. Some researchers suggest the reflex could be acquired over time, though more evidence is needed. For now, we simply do not understand the underlying purpose of this wiring error. There's a strange irony here. While a biological reboot happens for most of us, for some, the system simply crashes. Consider those suffering from chronic sinusitis. They live with inflamed sinuses, constant congestion, and a runny nose. When researchers analyzed the cells of these patients, they found something troubling. The cilia did not beat faster when air was puffed onto the tissue. This is where the case becomes truly compelling. It suggests that chronic sinusitis may be linked to cilia that are unable to properly reset the nose after a sneeze. The high-velocity cleaning system is essentially broken, leaving the nasal passages in a perpetual state of discomfort because the restart button no longer works. Beyond the biological glitch, this reflex can become a genuine hazard. You might wonder why it's so difficult to stop a sneeze once the urge begins. Once the sensory trigger reaches your brainstem, it initiates a motor program that effectively bypasses your conscious control. Attempting to suppress this reflex is not only difficult, it's physically dangerous. When you try to stifle the sneeze by pinching your nose or closing your mouth, the massive pressure generated, which can propel air at 150 kilometers per hour, has nowhere to escape. It hits a wall of closed soft tissue. Instead of clearing the path, that kinetic energy surges backward. It forces air into the eustachian tubes, risking damage to your delicate eardrums. It can cause capillaries in your eyes to burst, creating subconjunctival hemorrhages, or even place dangerous strain on the blood vessels in your sinuses and brain. The reflex is so tightly hardwired that once the signal clears the point of no return in the brainstem, your muscles contract with such intensity that overriding them is virtually impossible. This information is not medical advice or a diagnosis. You should see a healthcare professional or seek care if you have health concerns. We're left with a lingering mystery. Why did the photic sneeze reflex evolve in the first place? Is it a harmless genetic leftover? Or does this strange interaction between our eyes and our nose serve a hidden protective purpose that we have yet to uncover? From the high-speed blast of 150 kilometers per hour to the rhythmic scrubbing of microscopic cilia, the sneeze is far more than a nuisance. It's a sophisticated, high-pressure maintenance tool that our bodies insist on running, regardless of whether we are in a quiet boardroom or stepping into the midday sun. We've seen how the trigeminal nerve can have its wires crossed, turning a beam of light into a biological explosion, and how a failure in this system can lead to the chronic struggle of sinusitis. We've explored the dangerous redirection of pressure when we try to force the body to hold in its own cleanup cycle. Instead of an annoyance or a simple glitch, the sneeze remains a vital, high-velocity cleaning system that works behind the scenes to keep our respiratory passages clear, whether we like it or not.